Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure for me. And maybe before we get into that, I would just like to honor Pastor Hloslo and Pastor Mancha and all the leaders of the CDC for giving me the opportunity to come and talk about my work. It's not something I get to do a lot. But yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity. And as it is said in my bio, I am Mthobisi Ndaba and I come from KZN. Maybe just because this is about my career, I will focus more on the career stuff in terms of talking about who I am. I can say a
Yeah.
lot of things. I'm Zulu. I'm saved, and I think that should be obvious, and that's why I could be asked to come and speak here. I am born again. I love the Lord, but yeah, my career started with studying electrical engineering at University of the Witwatersrand in
Oh,
2011.
interesting.
I can hear the shock.
Yes.
Yes, I started there, and then in my very first year, I realized that this was not really something I was passionate about. This
Yeah.
was something that spoke to the core of who I am. Therefore, I decided to then change into social work. So I passed my first year, registered for second year in electrical engineering, and deregistered on the first day of classes, and then changed to social work. And I got an opportunity in my second year of social work to be part of a program that was called the Mellon Mays Undergraduate Fellowship Program, which was a Mellon Foundation funded program by the US um, Mellon Foundation, which
Yeah.
was aimed at supporting young Black students who had aspirations of becoming an academic. At the time, I didn't really know much about what it takes to become an academic, but one of my lecturers, then became my academic mentor, Nkosiyazi Dube, was the one who identified the potential in me and then, told me about the program. I applied, I got in, and that program helped me to understand what it takes to become an academic. And maybe before I jump the gun, I'm sure we'll talk about that at a
Yeah.
later stage. So yeah, then I passed I finished my undergraduate degree, went straight to masters in sociology, and then after the masters, I went straight to doing a PhD. So I can basically say I've been at school for 22 years. If I don't
Oh,
count
wow, that's a
grade
long
R
time.
and preschool. Thank
That's
you.
a very long time.
Yeah, no, it is. It is quite a long time.
So basically, you've been to school more like many years more than my little sister. That's interesting. Wow. So I assume that was what I would say the defining moment in terms of sort of making it clear to what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Just take us in depth in terms of what that moment meant for you to be clear about your purpose, and more maybe also elaborate in the impact, the importance that your mentor played
Yeah.
in you being the person you are today.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So I think for me, the defining moment was in first year of university when I was still in electrical engineering, because that was when I had to ask myself some really hard questions about whether this is what I should be doing, because I was excelling in my studies in high school as a science student,
Yeah.
you know, matriculated on top of my class, and there were expectations about what I would become. Engineering was a career that had the status, that everyone expected that, somebody with my academic performance would be in. And it was quite a shock for many, like it was for some of you here, that I would change to social work instead of something like medicine or something like that. But the key people that played a role in my life at that time where somebody who was like an older brother of mine at church, who really affirmed the decision that I was making at a time where everyone was questioning me. Why am I making this decision? Is it because cost Charles that I am changing, so his name is Njabulo Sbi. I was from church. He was very, very instrumental. He supported me, prayed with me, and encouraged me to make that decision before I even met my academic mentor. And then in meeting my academic mentor in second year, he's one of the people that really played a big role even in helping me get through my studies from undergrad to postgrad, because he he did not only just give me access to this opportunity, but he further gave me opportunities to get experience in teaching and or lecturing. I had an opportunity to teach some of his courses while he was still finishing up his PhD. I had just finished my undergrad, and I got an opportunity to teach some of his courses for first years, which I think is one of the things that really helped me to fall in love with the teaching aspect of what we do. After that, he gave me so many other opportunities to do research, um, and more teaching even at postgrad after I finished my master's. So he was like not just a mentor in Pastor Mancha's term in Level Up. I would say he was also a sponsor at the same time.
Oh,
So yeah,
lovely.
basically that's the role he played.
So what I'm taking from this is the importance in having that person who identifies talent in you. Secondly, also the importance of having an opportunity to showcase that talent in
Yeah,
what your mentor did, not only in identifying you, but also providing the platform for that. And
yeah.
thank you very much for that. And in what you just highlighted, I assume in terms of there is something that is related to education that you're doing to day to day. Maybe take us through in terms of your day to day life. What does it entail for you to what you do at work and what do you do at work?
Okay, thank you. So I currently work for the Northwest University in the Potchefstroom campus, in a center called the Center for Higher Education Professional Development. And what I do, I'm basically teaching lecturers how to teach.
Wow. Interesting.
Yes, our center provides continuous professional development for people who are academics, lecturers from TVET colleges, and others who are aspiring to be lecturers. So we have short learning programs, and we also just started a master's program in higher education studies,
Nice.
which sort of aims to professionalize academia, because most academics come in as subject matter experts. They would have studied up to PhD in physics, but they do not really have what we call pedagogical competencies, which is knowledge of how to teach. And that is why, sometimes students struggle to follow their lecturers in classes, because lecturers just know the subject matter, but they do not know how to relate that subject matter to other people in such a way that they understand it. So that's basically what we do. But academic work is just beyond teaching. As I said, we only started teaching at the master's program now, but I've been working there since April last year. So part of the work that we do, maybe let me put it this way: our work as academics is divided into four things. One, it's teaching, which would normally form a big chunk of your work or workload. And then two is research, and that involves continuously conducting research, whether it's through a research project or your own study, and others would do that as part of their PhD, would form part of their KPIs around research. And then there is also what we call community engagement, which is the university working with the community, and depending on where you are located, what is regarded as your community would be different. In my case, because I'm in a unit that focuses on academics, so our community is working with academics within the university and also within other universities as well. And then the last part is administration, which is like the part I don't really like about my job. It involves marking, coordinating modules, all of those kinds of things, the administrative stuff, the paperwork, putting in the marks, writing reports, and all of those kinds of stuff. So, but my daily work at this point focuses more on teaching and developing the content for the short learning programs that we teach. So I designed some of the short learning program. I also designed some of the modules that we teach at the masters that we just started now. So, and also it involves applying for the accreditation of new qualifications, because we are about to add a postgraduate diploma in higher education studies, which kind of does the same thing as our master's, but at a different NQF level. Yeah.
No, wow. That sounds like a lot of things that you do. And I think for some of us who took a bit of a long time in university, we needed people like you to teach our lecturers how to make us do things in record time. But thank you for that. And with that being said, not only are you a professional academia, you also do writing on the side,
Yeah.
and also public speaking. Take us through, how do you balance that in being a husband, a professional academia that has 4 pillars only in your career, but there's also extras that you do in your life? How do you balance that so that there's enough work-life balance that's happening?
Interesting question. I would say one of the things about my work is that it's about, like, a big chunk of it is about writing, because research includes writing publications, publishing journal articles, book chapters, and to some extent, even academic books as well. So I think because of the amount of time that we spend writing, for me, writing is not that much of a burden, if I can put it like that, because it's something that I do almost every day. But in terms of balance, to be honest with you, I don't think there is ever balance. I think the whole concept of work-life balance is an elusive concept. It's not something that is really there in reality. But I think the way I have been able to manage all of these things that I do, outside just like my own work, the podcasting, the writing, serving at church, and all of those kinds of things, is just about making sure that the same thing doesn't suffer all the time. Because if I am going to give myself fully to one thing, something else would probably suffer. In a sense that I might not be able to do my writing, especially when it's like exams time or it's around registration time, because my work demands quite a lot of me at that time. But what I really like about my work is that there's a lot of flexibility, in a sense that in the unit I'm in, I don't teach many modules. I only teach two modules per semester. And that means I have a lot of time to fit in other stuff, like my own writing, because my work at this time is not that much demanding. And for now, we've completed the modules, and all that is left is marking. But until then, I have a lot of flexibility on my side. So it's just that idea of making sure that it's not the same thing that suffers all the time. If I'm putting more attention on the writing because I want to complete a book, then not be doing much on the podcasting side. And that's why probably right now I haven't released a podcast because I've been just trying to get this book out. So those kinds of things, it's just like juggling. It's never, I don't think there's ever like a complete balance between all of these things.
No, thank you very much. Taking from what you just said, just make sure that uh, the same the one thing doesn't suffer all the time. If I paraphrase you correctly,
Yeah.
meaning that there must be some sort of a prioritization based on the season that you find yourself in. If there's
Yeah.
flexibility, you prioritize other things. If it's academic season, you know. And thank you for that, Saints. I believe you have your notepads and taking those notes because wow, there's information that is very beautiful and profound from this gentleman here. So let's just move it a bit away from you, but let's take it to a national or and yeah, a national landscape. What would you say is the most challenging part about being an academic in our country, South Africa?
May you please repeat that? Sorry, I didn't get the question.
Now, I was saying that in terms of South Africa, what would you say is the most challenging part
Mm.
about being an academic?
Okay, so I think one of the biggest challenge is funding for studies, because in order to become an academic, you need to have at least a master's degree. And with time, there is what we call credential inflation, which is the idea that as more people get a master's degree because of unemployment, people are staying longer at university, they are studying further. Therefore,
Mm,
there's a lot of people that have a master's degree. And I'm sure this is something that's kind of happening in other fields as well. And therefore, in order
yeah.
to sift out people, they end up upping, the minimum requirements for entry, which is now the PhD. If you look at most adverts for academics, they would say you should either have a PhD or be registered for one and about to complete, or be willing to register for a PhD, because that now has become the standard. And it's not only that, you've got to have a PhD and you must have published one or two journal articles, which shows
Wow.
that you are a productive academic. So in order for one to be able to study that far, then
Mm,
you kind of need to have funding for it. And with the kind of issues we have with higher education funding, I think that's one of the major challenges. And then two, it's also the funding cuts in higher education. As much as NSFAS funding, which is funding students, has increased over the years, the funding that the state gives to universities to be able to get more lecturers, to be able to build student residencies and all of those kinds of necessary resources for these students to get good quality education, has not increased accordingly. Instead, it has kind of decreased. There has been a lot of funding cuts for research, which affects academics' performance in terms of their KPIs, as research is one of the KPIs that they need to perform in. So funding is one of the biggest challenges. But two, um, it's the issues around globalization and neoliberalism. You know, the growth in technology is bringing more challenges. Right now, we are struggling with people writing assignments with ChatGPT, and we haven't really figured out how to deal with that.
yeah.
There isn't a straightforward way of dealing with it. Sometimes you deal with it in one way, and that can get you in trouble, because even the university doesn't have a strict policy and mechanisms to make sure, or to give us clarity in terms of how to deal with those things. So
No,
that
yes,
is
continue.
there's another, yeah, that is another one of the biggest challenges. Then last one would be around the changing nature of what it means to be an academic. With universities operating more like businesses, there's a lot of accountability. And sometimes it can end up becoming like, you kind of have to just pass students, because if you don't, it can reflect bad on you. That can affect your promotion. That, students have become like customers. Whereas I think a lot of academics want to maintain the integrity and the quality of the education that they provide, by making sure that people who have not met the minimum requirements for succeeding in one level of their degree program to go to the next one, they don't, so that they are able to get the skills that they need to be able to succeed after that, and even in the workplace. So those are some of the major challenges that I can think of right now.
No, thank you very much. You highlighted something which maybe I'd want to expand on in terms of LGBT writing assignments, and also um, sort of managing how you make people progress or student progress in terms of academics. What do you think that is the impact of that to the quality of education in South Africa?
Well, it kind of has implications for the quality of the graduates we produce,
Mm.
because I believe that education should be training people how to think.
Yeah,
And the way that we design, at least from my training, in terms of how we design modules and
yeah,
assignments and all of these things, has in mind the kind of skills that students need to develop after doing the work. That is why in a course outline, we would often have what we call learning outcomes, that
yeah.
after you have gone through this module, this is what you should be able to do. But
Mm-hmm.
if ChatGPT is doing all the work for you, you will get the
Yeah,
mark, but you will not get the skill.
yeah.
And probably that raises questions about whether will those skills be needed in a world where ChatGPT exists. That's one question. Maybe at this time, those skills are still necessary because of the stage at which the development of this AI is, in terms of
Mm.
accuracy and all of those kinds of issues that still exist with the kind of artificial intelligence that we have. It's not yet at the level of intelligence of human beings. So I
Mm.
think then, until that time, we'll still need people to have these kinds of skills, and abilities. And if ChatGPT is doing all the work, that means these people are not developing those kind of skills. They are not learning to think according to their discipline. So if they are in medicine, they're not learning to think like doctors. If they are in social work, they're not learning to think like a social worker. Or engineers, they're not learning to think like an
Mm.
engineer, because most of the work is done by this artificial intelligence. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Doc. I'm just grateful that we have people like you in the academic world who still values. What I see one of the comments actually touched on it, the art of teaching, because I believe as much as there's art in painting and everything, there's also the art of teaching that has to hold the authenticity of the value of academics or knowledge. Um, there's a lot of questions that I could ask you about this because it's one of my favorite topics. But let's move to your
Sure.
writing passion or project.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you something about one of your books, The King Said Occupy. The reason that I'm picking this is because we just come from Passover, the CJC launch, and one of the messages was, you know, occupying. So I just wanted you to tell us what is the message behind you writing the book, The King Said Occupy. Doc?
Ish, I'm losing you. I don't know if it's my internet. My
Yeah, I
network
think we
this
lost
side.
each other there.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please just repeat the last part of your question. I'm sorry, I lost you a bit there.
No, no, I was just saying, take us through the message of you writing the book, The King Said Occupy. What is the message behind writing that?
Hello?
Can you, I can still hear you. I don't know, maybe it's on my side. Can you hear me?
No, I think it's on the doctor's
Yeah, I
side.
can hear you even though, yeah, it's probably on my side. Um, but yeah, please just repeat the last part of your question.
The question was, take us through the message behind the book, The King Said Occupy.
Okay, no, thank you. Book is anchored on a portion of scripture found in Luke 19, verse 13, which is Jesus' parable of minas, or the parable of the 10 servants, where Jesus is talking to his disciples and is telling them about this man who was about to be crowned king and had to go to a far country to be crowned king, and called 10 of his servants and
Mm,
gave them money and asked them to use this money to do business with it until he comes back. And he says, occupy until I come.
mm,
And he comes back, he asks them to give an account of what they did with the money. And they each give an account. One says, I made 10 times more money. The second one comes and says, I made 5 times more money. And then the third one comes and says, I was so afraid that you are a man who reaps where you did not sow. Therefore, I hid the money in a handkerchief. And I usually joke and say, I'm glad he didn't hide it under the couch. So, so he says, I hid the money in a handkerchief. Here is your money as it was. And then the king calls that servant a wicked servant and a lazy servant. And all the other ones, he says, well done, good and faithful servant. For the one who made 10 times more money, he was put in charge of 10 cities, to be a governor of 10 cities. And the other one was put in charge of 5 cities. So the idea is that just like these servants, we are all called by our King Jesus.
yeah.
And when he called us, he gave us gifts, different kinds of gifts to different kinds of people. And he gave us instruction, which is to say, occupy until I come. And that is to say, do business until I come, work with this until I come. And the idea is that while we wait for the coming of the Lord, we do not wait in idleness, but we wait in pursuit of purpose. In other words, before the Lord comes, we should be doing what the Lord would be doing if you are still in the flesh.
Yeah.
And that's basically the message of the book. And it's to say, one day we will all have to stand before the Lord and account and give an account for what we did with what he gave us, whether it was resources, whether it was connections, relationships, talents, gifts, abilities, opportunities. We will all have to account to God for what we did with what he has given us. And then it also to say that we will get to heaven because of our faith in Christ. But when we get to heaven, there are crowns, and crowns are not given on the basis of faith. They are given on the grounds of performance. So if we are not obedient enough to execute on the assignments God has given us, when we get to heaven, we will miss out on the crowns. So the book looks at what it takes then to live a purpose-driven life. It has themes around identity, which at the core of that, it's the idea that identity is not something we go out there and discover, but it's something that we have the agency to form based on what God says about who we are, as identity is the idea we have of who we are. It has themes around purpose, it has themes around passion. It does draw on my own personal experiences of changing from electrical engineering to social work. It has themes of resilience as well, drawing particularly on Paul's experience with the thorn, that it was the grace of God that enabled him to endure. And I speak of grace for endurance. In other words, the stuff that we experience in our pursuit of purpose, which God would not take away, He would have given us the grace to endure it. So that's, in summary, what my message is about.
Wow, thank you. Wow, Yeah, I wish I was not a host. I was just taking notes because wow, I'm learning a lot, and there are some things that are speaking to me right now. So while we're still on, in putting together faith and experiences, you are in a very space whereby sometimes they say the more educated you become, the more you can question God. How has your faith made you stand firm in a very secular space of knowledge or academics to still be, to this point, glorifying God above all else?
That's a very powerful question. I think my personal experience of God is what has sustained me, regardless of what I have learned in terms of what science says, in terms of what philosophy says. There's nothing that beats my personal experience. Nothing can ever question my personal experience of God. So I think that's what has been very helpful, but it is also the grace of God that sustains us. That we all, I believe that all other kinds of knowledges are inferior to what the word of God has to say.
Yeah.
Well, in class, I will teach whatever the science says because that's what I'm hired to do. But that does not become my belief system. It doesn't form part of my belief system. It does somehow shape the way that I think about things, the way that I think about the world. And I think that's reflected in the way that I write my books. If you read my books, you will see that I am an academic and I can't separate that from who I am, because it's part of my training. But when it comes to my values and my belief system, the scripture takes precedence. When science says we come from baboons, and I'm like, in the beginning, God, God said, "Let us make man." So it's just that belief and conviction about the truthfulness and the veracity of scripture.
Wow. No, thank you very much for that. I have a lot of questions, but for the sake of time, I won't go through all of them so that we can give the viewers, the listeners, a couple of questions also on their side. So I'll ask you, in terms of advice, what can you give to a young person who's from the township or a village or somebody already currently who's experiencing some of the challenges that you have highlighted? What advice would you give to that person right now, just to give them courage, to stand firm in this moment?
Well, there's a lot of challenges we spoke about, but I assume you are referring to challenges and issues of funding and access to school.
Yeah.
I would say just be determined to get in. That you do not lose heart if you have to keep on trying and applying for funding. Something will come out. And I'm saying this because of experience. And maybe just to give context to that, when I did my master's, I didn't have funding. I only had what at Wits we call the Postgraduate Merit Award, and that only covered my tuition fees. And I stayed at res, but I didn't have funding for res. So I had to work two jobs to be able to make ends meet. And by the time I finished, I still owed the university about 32,000 rands. And for the last 3 months of my master's program, I didn't have a place to stay. So I had to squat at the West Campus Village. And if you know how big the rooms are, you would understand what kind of a situation that was. I would put an air mattress under the desk in my friend's room so that I could be able to sleep. And there were days where I didn't have even food to eat, but I was just determined. And even when I had to register for my PhD, I was owing the university money. I had funding for the PhD that would have given me money to pay the university what I was owing, but I couldn't get access to the funding because I wasn't registered. So I couldn't register because I was owing. So I was stuck. And that process took about 6 months. I almost lost the scholarship. And one of the things that helped me through that was just that determination to not give up. I wrote to the head of school, I wrote to the dean of the Faculty of Humanities. I didn't get help. I wrote to the CFO of the university. I didn't get help. I wrote to all the deputy vice chancellors of the university. I didn't get help until I wrote to the vice chancellor of the university. I wrote an email to Professor Adam Habib, who was not even in the country at the time. And that's when I could get help. And the people at the fees office said, no, it was actually all a misunderstanding. 6 months later. So the point I'm trying to make is that just be determined to get to where you want to be. No matter how long it takes, if you need to get help, get the help that you need. Keep on applying, even when sometimes it feels like you're just getting turned down. Something will come up. I hope that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Determination and keep on applying. Just like the scripture says, keep on knocking, the door will be open. So, Saints, I'll open up the floor to the listeners on the other side. There's a couple of questions in our comment section. In our chat section from Tondani. He said, will the madam agree that you're balancing well, or this takes away from family time?
Okay. I think she can speak. She would be the right person to actually answer that question. But in my own view, as I said, I don't always get it right. There are times where she's not getting as much attention as she needs. There are times where she's actually getting more attention than she wants, because especially, for example, when I was still writing the book, I would have very early mornings and very late evenings because I had to do it outside of my work hours. And that would sometimes mean we don't get to spend as much quality time as she would like. But the other nice thing about us is that some of the things that I do, we actually do together. So there are times where she would have to listen to what I'm thinking about one of the chapters, and I would try to explain the concepts and the ideas to her, and she would be poking holes into those ideas. So it's not the case that, as I said, there's hardly ever like a complete balance. But I do my best to make sure that I give her the time that she needs, and she does her best to understand when she doesn't get that time. Yeah. But as I
Thank you
said,
for that answer.
she's the only one who can accurately answer that question.
Next time we'll bring in a bigger podcast time also, so that this question can
Sure.
be also answered from her side. So another question is, your academic path spans from social work, sociology, and education. How have those disciplines shaped your view of purpose and on your calling?
Okay, thank you for that question. So the whole reason why I chose social work was because I believe that it would equip me with the kind of skills I needed to work with people. And I think it has done that very well. I have done quite a lot of work raising awareness around mental health. Um, and also just like being able to interact with people, because all of the stuff that I do outside of my day job has to do with helping people, empowering people, and I think social work gave me that. Even the kind of work I do with podcasting, I learned to ask questions in social work. And I think those are the kinds of skills that I gained from there. My own writing comes from the training I got in social work, which um, included sociology, psychology, which I still draw from now. Even when I write my books, you will see the reflection of that. Um, and then education is something that I was just passionate about. And the way that it all connected was that my research, my honors research project, my master's research project, and my PhD research project were all in the field of education, which is why it made sense for me to do my PhD in education. But that's also the nature of humanities. We refer to what is called a multidisciplinary space. All of these different disciplines, they speak to each other. It's not like engineering and medicine, where you can't really jump between the two. But within the humanities and the social sciences, you can actually move quite easily between the two, because there are a lot of parallels in terms of the foundational disciplines that inform what we do in the different fields.
No, thank you very much. There's also a couple of questions since we still have some time. There are two. One says, how can one get involved in the program or short courses that you have mentioned into getting into lecturing? And the second one says, what advice would you give your younger self when you started this?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start with the program, because it's an easy one. If you go to the website of the university and you search Center for Higher Education Professional Development, Center for Higher Education Professional Development, it will take you to the webpage of the center, which has a list of all the programs that we offer. And each of the short learning programs is around 12,000 rands, and it's 8 weeks. And then the masters is also there, and you can get information on the website. And then in terms of the last one, what advice I would give to my younger self? I feel like I'm still young. But what I would say is take a break. I feel if I were to start all over again, I wouldn't go straight from undergrad to PhD, because of one reason. I think I overworked myself, such that in my last year of the PhD, I had a mental breakdown. So I think I needed the rest in between, because of how demanding, the PhD is. So that would be my advice. And also, I would say marry early, like be quick to marry. Yeah, I would marry early.
Well, as a fellow young person, I won't comment on that one. Even soon, Daddy can attest, but not me. So yeah, no, but I'm glad that you're sitting here with us, meaning that you also overcame the mental health issue.
Yeah.
Even though it's not an easy one to overcome, but we praise God that we're still here with us. There's a couple of last two questions. Saints, please bear with me when I take the last two. So the other one says, you were named one of the top 200 million Guardian. How do you stay grounded and keep your eyes on the mission?
How do I stay grounded and keeping my eyes on the mission? For me, it was a great acknowledgement of the work and my contribution. Um, and I appreciated that and I celebrated it. But I always have in mind the whole idea that God gives me the assignment and until I get to a point where I am in front of God and He says, "Well done, good and faithful servant," um, it's not enough. And two, is to say everything that I've been able to do, whether it's the opportunities I got to study, to travel, to write, to get published. And I think I've had a privilege that a lot of young people my age have not had.
Yeah.
And just acknowledging that that is all by the grace of God, I think is what keeps me grounded. And it's also what helps me be also passionate about paying it forward, because I know that there are people that God brought into my life that I could not have been able to do what I've been able to do without them. And I just want to also be that person to somebody else as my way of expressing my gratitude to God and just acknowledging that it's all by the grace of God.
No, thank you for that. I know we are out of time, but these questions, I think that the answers would actually make a huge difference to the people who ask them. The other one is you have mentioned determination during the challenging times, but they're very curious in knowing how you maintained your faith and trust in God throughout that waiting period. And how did you continue believing, pushing forward? And yeah, the other one is when is the university honoring you with a professor title? Because you have done amazing.
No, thank you for that. I think the question about faith, it's also because I wasn't dealing with it by myself. I think there's something so important about relationships. There's something so important about being part of a community, because the people that helped me at the time, the friend that I was staying with, my mentor who would sometimes buy me food, not even knowing that sometimes that would be the only meal I would have for the day. So those kinds of things, relationships and having people. And one of the things that I love to say is that it's also important for us to build those relationships before we need them.
Yeah.
The people that helped me, that held my hand, that kept on encouraging me, that kept on, helping me believe that, I can still get through this, things will be fine, I will get registered and all of that, are people that I had relationships with way before I needed that kind of help. So for me, I think that was one of the important things. God used the people I had around me to hold my hand and to strengthen me in those times. And that is what sustained my faith. When is the university honoring me with a professorship? It doesn't work like that. You earn the professorship in a sense that it's based on your contribution to the body of knowledge. It takes quite a lot of writing and publication, academic writing and publication, which is not what I do, because I don't have aspirations of becoming a professor. I'm probably going to become a pastor before I become a professor. So I don't have aspirations of becoming a professor, and that is why I'm not working as hard to really climb the academic ladder. But I'm doing my work, I'm doing research, I'm publishing papers, but not breaking my back to be able to get to professorship level, because purpose-wise, that's not where the Lord would want me to be.
Okay, no, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Dr. Ndaba, the last one is you have a book launch that's coming on the 26th of April. What can we look forward to that day? And what's that one book that you can recommend for our listeners tonight before we let you go?
Please repeat that. I'm sorry, I missed it.
I was saying, since you're having a book launch on the 26th of April, what can we look for towards that day? And what is that one book that you can recommend for our listeners tonight?
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, we do have a book launch. I'm launching my fourth book at Eternal Glory Church in 4 ways. It's titled The King Said Occupy. I've shared a bit about it. The tickets are available at Quicket. It's 300 rands. That also includes the copy of the book. And I would really love to see some of you there celebrating with us. And there's quite a lot that you could look forward to. We have, I'll be giving a talk, but besides that, there's quite a strong and very inspiring panel that I've put together. Bonginkosi Ndlela, Pastor Bonginkosi Ndlela, some of the KEF people would know him, is gonna be there. Sis Ncebakazi Msomi is gonna be there, and Sister Ndokazi Maseti is gonna be there as well, who's also an academic, a psychologist, a research psychologist teaching at UJ. She's going to be talking about the kind of work that she does in and outside of academia. So it's going to be a very inspiring experience. And in terms of the book, I would recommend maybe, let me say, 2 books. Level Up by Pastor Manja.
Yes.
I had an opportunity to be part of the early stages of the writing of that book. It's an incredible book. If you don't have it, I do not know why. Maybe you need deliverance. I think it's a very important book, especially when on around these topics of careers. And then the second book I would recommend would be Daring Greatly by Brene Brown, because I think it's one of the books that has really helped me around emotional issues.
Yes.
So I think it's a book that I've even bought for some of my friends. But yeah, you can also buy my own books. I have the Jumpstart Effect. I have The King Said Occupy, and you would also not be disappointed in those ones as well. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for your time, and thank you, for imparting the greatness that you are, not only in our society, but also in our community of the Church of Jesus Christ. So, Saints, I would just like to give you a round of applause to our guest tonight, Dr. Ndaba. And with that being said, thank you very much for your time, Doctor. And thank you very much, Saints, for borrowing us the extra 10 minutes of your evening tonight. I will just ask